It's not about, it's not about, it's not about the injury. It's not about, it's not about, it's not about the injury. It's about the recovery. It's about the recovery.
Hi folks, this is Paul Padda with another episode of the Paul Padda Podcast coming to you from Red Chimp Studios. Today I have a guest that I'm really honored to have on the show, Bita Yeager, someone that I've known both professionally and personally. I see you out at many different events. I know you're very active in the community. Welcome and thank you for being here, Bita.
It's my honor to be here. Thank you for having me, Paul.
So tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, because those of us who go to court on a regular basis, we know you and I know all the important work you do. But tell our viewers a little bit about yourself in terms of, are you a native of Vegas? How did you get into the law?
Okay.
And give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm actually from New York originally. I ended up going to the West when I got a full ride scholarship, tuition scholarship to Brigham Young University. And I really enjoyed my time there. I actually then went to J. Reuben Clark University up there.
Very nice.
On a partial tuition scholarship, which was really nice. And then right after law school, one of the judges down here in Las Vegas needed a clerk. So a law clerk. So I actually applied and I got the job. So I came to Las Vegas literally 3 days after graduating from law school, and I thought I would only stay here for a year, but then I just fell in love with Las Vegas, so I stayed here.
See, you and I have a same story, because that was my plan. I came to Vegas thinking, well, who really lives in Vegas? You know, like most people, I was ignorant about the fact that there is a huge and lively community outside the Strip. The Strip is just really is not a 100% accurate representation of Las Vegas, though we love the Strip and we like the casinos and all the glamour, but this is a city like anywhere else, right? People just trying to raise their kids, people engaged in their community. But the thing about Vegas is it's so welcoming to outsiders, and you can come here as someone from somewhere else and really make it if you're willing to work hard. Yeah,
absolutely. And that was one of the great things about when I moved here. There was so much opportunity, especially in the legal profession. So I first clerked for Judge Gates, then I ended up clerking for Judge Adelia D. Guy, and then I clerked for Judge Huffaker. And I really wanted to go into criminal law, so I ended up at the public defender's office where I defended people's constitutional rights.
Very nice.
And I loved it. I love the people that I worked with. I really felt like it was important work to make sure that people were treated fairly in our court system. And so I was there for 18 and a half years and was even a team chief where I actually oversaw a team of attorneys.
So you were going to court on a regular basis, day in and day out. A lot of familiarity with constitutional law issues, defending the rights of people who've been accused of crimes. I think a lot of people out there have a misnomer, if you're a public defender, that you're somehow condoning whatever bad behavior a person's accused of.
No.
That's a really simplistic view. It's not accurate, right? I mean, as a public defender, you're defending the system and the United States Constitution.
Right, the Sixth Amendment.
The Sixth Amendment, right?
I mean, everyone has a right to an attorney, and it's my job to make sure that in that system, that person is treated fairly by the system, right? And there are laws that are written, and there are case law that the judges need to follow that sometimes they don't, right? So that's my job, to make sure that everyone is being held accountable, to make sure that the Constitution is upheld.
So what do you make of the current climate we're in? Because I have a lot of friends who are public defenders, and I always joke with them. I was a federal prosecutor.
Right.
But most of my career is civil attorney, but I also was a federal prosecutor for a period of time. And there used to be that being a prosecutor was a stepping stone to politics.
Right.
But now the tide has turned. And I think a lot of prosecutors are trying to run away from their record, it seems, at least politically. And being a public defender is considered now sort of like a thing that people would look at and say, wow, that's a great thing. And I just remembered a debate between in the Democratic Party where Joe Biden, now they're on the same ticket, Joe Biden said to Kamala Harris, hey, you were a prosecutor when I was representing the little guy in court. But I think that's really nice to see, because I say this even as a former prosecutor, we need more balance.
I agree. And you know what? if in looking at our bench right now, and I will tell you, like our National Bar Association has said that you really need balance on the bench.
Yes.
You need an even mix of civil attorneys, criminal attorneys,
Absolutely.
Plaintiffs, defense attorneys, prosecutors, and defense attorneys and public defenders. Right now, our bench, out of the 50, what is it? Well, I should say out of the 32 that handle civil and criminal, there is only one judge that was a career public defender.
Wow.
Right?
That's
and
really
you've got I think it's like 19 prosecutors. So it really does make a difference as far as bringing that balance, because you come from a different perspective, and I think it's really important to have that perspective.
I think that's the right word that you just used, is perspective. And we want people on the bench who have a broad perspective, because you have all kinds of issues coming into your courtroom.
Right.
And to me, I just think, and I'm just putting it out there, I'm speaking now as a minority,
right,
who I view the world sometimes a little differently, because I've had experiences where I know what it's like to feel discrimination or people look at you differently. I think that's really important, to have judges who have a broader perspective, and someone like yourself who is a minority also and has been a public defender, and you just bring a perspective that is really unique.
Right.
And it's important.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? The part of having that balance on the bench is also because you can educate your colleagues.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the one thing. They may not think of something. For example, when I was starting the community court, the Las Vegas Community Court, when I was a judge in justice court, we were talking about finding a location, because the whole point of it is to have a location that's accessible to the community.
Right.
So, one of the first things I said when they said, oh, we've got these 2 spots that we're looking at, I said, well, how close is it to a bus line?
Yeah.
And no one had thought about that.
Right.
Right? But I mean, that's access.
That's right.
And those are the kinds of things that.
And you would think of that because you had clients who are
Right.
coming to see you in court, right?
Right,
It's a big deal.
And yeah, it is a big deal. And that's what I'm talking about when you're talking about educating other colleagues about perspective,
Yeah.
right? So that way they can see and look and think, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought of that. But now that you say that, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So now I understand you're running for judge as well.
I am. I'm
And-
running for District Court Department 1.
Very good. Tell us about that department, and tell us why have you decided to do this?
So Judge Corey, who is currently the judge, is retiring.
Yes.
So it's an open seat.
I'm a huge fan of his, by the way.
Yeah,
He's
I
the
know.
nicest man in
He's
the
a
world.
very kind man.
Very
He
kind.
is very kind. So, I decided that this was a good time for me to kind of elevate my level of public service. Right now as a hearing master, I do all the mental health cases for our district court. So, I feel like there is more that I can do. I've done, I've pursued my passion as far as fairness and equity. And right now I sit on a statewide mental health committee, so I've been doing a lot with that. Yeah. And I just feel like it's a really good time to be able to serve my community and bring that different perspective.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I have expertise in is behavioral health issues. So because I do that mental health for our courts, I have a lot of knowledge and expertise about mental health and substance use addiction issues. In fact, we're going to be having a training for the judges statewide that I'm going to be participating in educating about those issues, because a lot of judges don't really understand mental illness. They don't understand the difference between mental illness, personality disorders, cognitive disorders, things like that. So it's good for them to know, so that way they can be more fair in their decisions about sentencing.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we were talking about this before we started the episode, which is that you are the hearing master for the specialty court.
I am.
And it's really interesting because it's so timely in the sense that, there's so much discussion now about whether you call it defunding the police,
Right.
which I don't know that that's necessarily the right phrase or way of putting it. But certainly there's a lot of talk about reforming the police, or at least more awareness about the fact that there are a lot of people who come into contact with the criminal justice system who are really suffering from mental health issues.
Right.
And the police, God bless them, I mean, they have a tough job to do.
It is a tough
but
job.
they're not always necessarily equipped to be, counselors, social workers,
Right.
or people who are necessarily tuned in to mental health issues.
Right.
And so I think it's really fantastic that there's this discussion now where we are recognizing that, so many people who end up in the system, so to speak, and this is, I don't think, so true for the federal system, but certainly at the state level, there's a lot of people who are not bad people, but they're people who are really struggling with a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And the system can be very unrelenting. And I think there needs to be a greater awareness about the fact that, okay, well, maybe this person engaged in this conduct, but here's the backstory. And so you have that experience. You deal with it day in and day out.
I do. And in fact, I actually teach at the crisis intervention team with Metro.
Wow.
And it is a big issue.
Yeah.
And I think any police officer would tell you that, dealing with the mentally ill or people who are high because of their substance use disorder is one of the most challenging things that they have to deal with.
Right.
And just for Metro alone, they get 2,000 mental health crisis calls per month.
Wow, 2,000 per month?
Per month. So that equates to about 300 cases per week that are filed in my civil commitment.
And that's on top of all the other serious crimes. I mean,
correct.
Yeah.
So, and they are. I think they're really trying. They've really stepped it up on the training. I work, very closely with our CIT officers to make sure we're identifying like the super users of the system, the people that are constantly cycling, so that we can make sure that they have the supports that they need, maybe through the assisted outpatient treatment program that I also oversee. But I think, people say defund the police. I don't think that's necessarily the right term. I mean, we really should be figuring out community resources so that they know if they have someone that's in crisis, these are the ways that we can make sure that they get to where they need to. Right.
Well, I think certainly minority communities, underfunded communities with challenges, those are the ones that are probably the most in need of the police.
Right.
And I think that sometimes there's a disconnect in terms of what activists are saying and what's happening on the ground.
Right.
I think you're right. There definitely needs to be a lot of discussion and thinking about ways. And I think the police themselves would be open to that.
Absolutely.
Hey, they're there to serve the community. What can we all do as stakeholders to kind of come together and make it a better system? But the idea that you're just going to get rid of the police makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and in fact, I mentioned that I'm on the statewide mental health, crisis committee, and Metro actually participates in that, so that when we're talking about sort of long-term, real-life solutions, that they have that input, so that way we know that we're on the right path as far as what can be done. What can help our community, what can help those people in crisis, and help the families of those people in crisis.
So, and then on top of the criminal you've also served as a discovery commissioner, is that correct?
Yeah, so I actually do sit in for discovery. In fact, I had one that was scheduled for Friday.
Yeah.
And actually, when I was a justice of the peace, I had an all-civil calendar. So I did all civil for
have an amazing
a couple of
So
years.
you've been a justice of the peace, you've been a discovery commissioner, and you still serve as one. You are the hearing master on mental health cases, and you've been a public defender. You've tried cases. You have an amazing background.
Yeah, I've tried over 50
When do you ever find
jury
time
trials.
to have a little time off? God.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I had court this morning, on blue jeans, and at 1 o'clock I've got another statewide Zoom.
That's amazing.
So definitely very busy.
So what if you, with all your experience, what would you say, and I'm talking more in the criminal realm, could you distill it all down? What are some of your basic observations about our system and the people that are in it?
Well, I think that there are obviously some people that are dangerous, right, and need to be segregated from society because they're dangerous, and you don't want them to continue victimizing, our community. But there are also a segment of people who, with the right supports in place, can safely be reintegrated into our community, but we need to make sure that we hold them accountable.
Okay.
And I think that's one thing that I do in our specialty courts. So that is a treatment court that makes sure that those people that have, in my case, really acute mental illness, that they are linked to and they are working their treatment plan, but I hold them accountable.
Yeah.
If they're missing, anything, there's a sanction, that, there are consequences to that, right? But the thing that is incredibly rewarding to me is that as they progress, as they make those positive behavior changes, they really change their lives.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've seen has really been a great motivator has been when they reconnect with family.
Yeah.
Because they've been mentally ill and homeless for so long, they burned through all those bridges.
Yeah.
And once they connect with their mom or their kids.
You have a specific example you could tell us
Yeah,
about?
actually I do. So there was a gentleman, he has had bipolar disorder, or has bipolar disorder, I should say, and he was actually an entertainer on the Strip. But because of his disorder and because he had not really been taking care of it, he got caught up in the criminal justice system. And in fact, he had 2 cases. One of them was a misdemeanor case where they referred him to us from Henderson, where he had jumped in the back of a neighbor's yard and just started weeding furiously.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So the neighbor, it freaked them out,
course,
right?
yeah.
So he...
Or made them happy because he got rid of all the weeds.
Yeah, so...
When you're done, come over to my lawn.
Right? So he came to our mental health court, and it's not always smooth sailings, but for the first few months he was struggling, but then he really started to invest in his health and making sure he was doing everything he needed to access and work his treatment plan. And I remember probably about 6 to 8 months in, he had contacted his kids who lived in Oregon at this point.
Yeah.
And they were younger. I mean, they were maybe like 8 and 13. And he came to court, and I knew that, because we have our treatment team meeting, and so they had said, hey, so he had a conversation with his kids. And so that's the kind of thing that I talk about, because I use a technique called motivational interviewing. So it's a actually science-based technique to help people want to change, right, for the positive. So I said, hey, tell me about this conversation.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's been 4 or 5 years since I've talked to my kids, and I thought they forgot about me.
Oh,
and they didn't. They want me in their life, and that really makes me want to be healthy and there for them.
That's fantastic.
And so as he continued to progress,
yeah.
He's on probation. So, his probation officer would allow him to take short trips to like catch his kids' football games and all that kind of stuff. He successfully graduated and actually moved to Oregon so that he could be closer to his kids.
Oh, wow.
So, when you're talking about a long-term solution, he was completely crime-free while he was in mental health court.
Yeah.
That motivation from his family and the stability, he got a job, all those kinds of things really makes me truly believe that he is on that right path to be a successful and, productive community member.
That's a great
right?
story.
Yeah.
At my firm, we have a motto. We say it's not about the injury, it's about the recovery.
Right.
And a lot of doctors have told me they love that tagline. And I said, well, really, I came up with it because what we found was that everybody says, I didn't wake up thinking I want to be in an accident today.
Right.
And now I got to deal with all the stuff that goes along with that. I got to go to doctor's appointments. I just want to get back to where I was.
Yeah.
So the emphasis is always to the clients about getting recovered. And now in the criminal justice system, there's this new buzzword, restorative justice.
Yes.
Which I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Because historically, so much of the criminal justice system has been about punishment. And of course, it was also supposed to be about rehabilitation, but nobody really paid attention to that part.
Right.
But now there's a big focus on restorative justice, and everything you've been telling us in that story, and really your background and your whole career sounds to me, and even just telling me that you have these techniques to help people get to a point where they're like, that's restorative justice.
Right.
You're not about punishing someone. You're saying, well, we're not going to excuse the mistakes you made, but we want to help you so that the system doesn't just crush you as a person.
Right.
And we want to restore you back to your humanity.
Right. Well, and also to hold them accountable, right? I
Yeah.
mean, part of the restorative part of it is also to restore the victims.
Right.
The people that they've hurt.
Exactly.
And so, if there's restitution, we make sure we're on them. We say like, look, you need to get a job and you need to start working because you need to start paying on that restitution so that way that victim can be whole.
That's right.
And part of the restorative justice things that I've seen in other jurisdictions is when, inappropriate situations, I should say, when the victims and the defendant have a conversation about what happened, how they felt about it.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes the defendant needs to hear from the victim
Yeah.
how they felt.
That's right.
and what that really meant to them. And I think it also helps for the victim to know that this person is changing their life,
Right.
right? And they're on the right path, and they will do what they need to do to make sure, as much as they can.
And to be clear, it's not about being soft on crime.
No,
because
no.
if someone murders somebody,
Oh, no, no,
I mean, you
that's-
got to
yeah.
deal with that consequence. That's
Right.
you know, that person deserves punishment.
Right.
But a lot of what we're talking about in the criminal justice system are like property crimes.
Right. If you
yeah.
steal something,
Yes.
or all those kinds of things,
Right.
you know, and you know, a lot of cases that we also see have to do with drugs.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of those types of cases.
Yeah.
But you know, the challenge with mental illness, it's a brain disease, and there's a lot of stigma attached to it. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they have a mental illness, because so it's really about teaching them and saying, look, this is a disease just like heart disease or diabetes. You got to manage it with medication. It's not going away.
That's
so
true.
we really need to have you make sure you're making those choices to be healthy and maintain your health.
Yes.
Because when you don't maintain your health, that's when things go sideways.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, you have an amazing background, even more
Oh,
amazing
thank
than
you.
I had realized. I knew about some of the things you had done, but I
Right.
didn't understand or appreciate the depth of how many things you've been involved with. Really important, I think, not only just you know, jobs like being hearing master in a mental health court, but that's going to just give you great insight if you become a judge, and I certainly hope you do.
Yeah, thank
Best
you.
of luck.
Thank you.
I think
I
this
appreciate
community
it.
would be very, very fortunate to have you.
Thank you so
Bita,
much,
thank
Paul.
you so much.
Yeah.
We'll
I
do
guess
this.
fist
All
bump.
right,
Yeah.
okay. All right, folks, that's a wrap for another episode of the Paul Padda podcast. We've had Bita Yeager on today, and she's a phenomenal person with an amazing background. We've learned so much about mental health issues in the criminal justice system. It's been really fascinating. Hopefully, this has been an educational and informative episode. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll see you then. Take care.